Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. So some of you may know me, some of you may not. I'm Catherine Cox, I'm one of the stakeholder managers for GTR. So today's webinar very much is to talk to you about the implementation of the 2018 timetable. So I'll just be with you very briefly to give you just an overview of what we're talking about and some hints and tips for taking part in the webinar. And then I'll be handing over to Keith Jipps, who's our infrastructure director. So Keith will do a short presentation and we'll take questions, and then we'll hand over to Phil Hutchinson, our head of strategic planning, who will again do a short presentation, but then an opportunity to take questions from the floor. So throughout the webinar, you'll be able to ask questions. So we'll ask you to set your username for questions. You can type questions throughout via the type box at the bottom of your screen. You will need to scroll down to see this. The presenter will then respond to them verbally in the Q&A following their presentation. The presenter will read out the question and who it's from before responding up with the conversation. If you click all in the question box, you'll be able to view everybody's questions. If you have any problems throughout the session, Lawrence, our communications executive, is on hand to try and help you. You'll be able to contact him on 07422 079058. That's 07422 079058. Just bear with me 1 second. We're just going to switch presenters and then we'll start the presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Keith Jipps. I'm the infrastructure director. Just going to start my video now. Okay, I want to take this opportunity before we get on to the more exciting part of the May timetable to talk about something that's affecting the rail industry as a whole at the moment, but it's more around infrequent travel and weekends, where there's a challenge in the industry around declaring and informing passengers about what's happening when there's engineering works. So the way in which the industry normally works is we normally declare train timetables 12 weeks in advance. Due to a number of issues that have been happening around the north of England, and sorry about that, due to some delays in some infrastructure improvements in the north of England, the late delivery of the Thameslink timetable, and a number of other activities, it has caused the national rail processes to fall behind. So there was a point where train times were only being announced a week before. So the industry as a whole has signed up to a plan to ensure that information about train times, especially those at weekends that are affected by engineering works, will be announced in the short term for a minimum of 6 weeks in advance. What this means to our passengers is when you go on to the information systems like National Rail Inquiries, our website, our apps, you will get a flag that says, please check before you travel because times may change. So this is something that's affecting the whole railway industry across the piece. It's something that the industry is working very closely to deal with, to make happen. And the reason for raising it here today is there is a significant issue with Go via Thameslink railway services, in the fact that we are currently still working through the final phases of providing information and on our timetable for May, and as a result some of our changes in train times will not be notified for within that 6 week period even. So the message we will be putting out to our passengers is, if you are traveling at weekends or overnights when engineering works are most likely to happen, there could be significant changes to train times, and we would be wanting people to recheck at least 2 weeks in advance before they travel and keep on checking, just to make sure that there's no changes to their timetable. It's something we are working on with our train planning teams and our operational teams to make sure that we can actually get back to the point where we can give our customers the good 12-week minimum notice period, but it is something that's going to be going on for a little while. Our focus has to be at the moment on delivering the May timetable. That's going to have some significant changes for passengers. Nearly every single train will change. and we need to make sure that that message has got across as our priority. And Phil Hutchinson is head of strategic planning. We'll be talking about the timetable in a very short period. That was pretty much what I was going to be talking about as part of this recovery plan that's nationally to improve information to passengers about altered train services due to engineering works. It is something that we are going to be pressing very hard once we're beyond the May timetable implementation, and we will get back to a point at some point where the information will be much more freely available. So that was all I was going to raise on this at the matter. So I'm just going to check if there's any questions that have come in at all. Hi again. We've had a couple of questions. The first one is from Trevor. I'll read it out and then give you the answer. So here at Orr and also Hastings, we're aware of quite serious infrastructure failures in the London Bridge area. Have these problems been finally resolved to ensure the infrastructure is fit for purpose for the enhanced Thameslink frequencies through this area? One of the key activities that Network Rail have been undertaking is a program called the Thameslink Resilience Plan. That is £300 million worth of infrastructure works and also operational cost, which has resulted in a lot more infrastructure access to undertake works to points, signalling, track, to try and improve the reliability across the whole of the Sussex and Kent networks. That work's been very successful. We're still getting some occasional infrastructure failures, but we are seeing that general reliability of Network Rail's infrastructure is improving all the time. One of the areas that they are also investing in is additional response teams and maintenance teams. So there's more people out overnight maintaining our railway, but equally when things go wrong, there's larger teams that are there to respond. So we're confident that Network Rail are dealing with many years of sort of underinvestment in their infrastructure. The Thameslink timetable has definitely generated a lot more effort and finances in this area. So we are confident that we will see a massive improvement in infrastructure reliability for the May timetable and beyond, and that will be maintained as well. A second question is, this has come from Hannah, and it says you mentioned disruption to overnight services. If there is little notice of changes, will there be bus replacements provided as usual, and what support will passengers get at stations to ensure they can complete their travel plans when staff numbers are likely to be lower? What we will commit to doing is, when there is disruption that has been caused to engineering works and it is late notice, we will do everything we can to make sure that is communicated, what those changes are. But what we'd also ensure is that we will put additional staff in where it's required. We're hopeful that we will be able to be in a position to at least give advance warning if engineering works are going to be taking place in certain areas, but it might not necessarily be the full timetable. So there will be an alert that tells people that there could be challenges with their journey. And as soon as we get the information about what the train services will be, we would make sure that is communicated effectively. We do believe this is a short-term problem. As time goes on, once our timetable is embedded, we will start to rapidly improve the updates on train services. So there'll be more resource put into our train planning teams to help get over this challenge that we face. But rest assured that there will be enough people out there to support any passengers that are only getting late notice changes. Okay, it appears that there's no further questions for me regarding the recovery plan regarding short-term notification of train service changes. So we're about to hand over to Phil Hutchinson, who's Head of Strategic Train Planning.
Right, good afternoon everybody. My name is Phil Hutchinson, Head of Strategic Planning. Apologies for the start there. I've pressed the wrong button as we're beginning there. Okay, so we're now less than 4 weeks away from what is the biggest timetable change this part of the UK rail network will have seen for many years. And yes, a lot has been going on in terms of getting ready for it. So ever since January, we've been running trains via London Bridge in order to train our drivers on the new layouts. That is continuing. And then since the 26th of February, we've been running trains through from Horsham to Peterborough and from Brighton to Cambridge, and that is clearly one of the new routes and of the expanded Thameslink network. And we've been training a number of drivers through those preview trains, as well as getting our customers and used to the new services, and giving the people a bit of a preview. We've also been testing the automatic train operation through the core. That has been operating in passenger mode for some weeks now on some trains, as we start to train our drivers on the new infrastructure and signalling that will be required from next year, which is when the services step up from there as well. So we're on course operationally to deliver this timetable, and we're obviously now in the area of a major drive in our communications to ensure all of our passengers know about the changes that are coming forward. The simple message is at this stage that every single schedule on our network changes. So that's we currently run somewhere in the region of 3,200 trains, and all of those will change before or on the timetable change date. We've got a message, please check before you travel, on the 20th of May, and everything's ramping up from there. We have a dedicated website that is called Railplan 2020. That's our marketing campaign that's available, www.railplan2020.com. That has all of the details of all the new timetables, all of the reasons and what the program delivers, and that is where we're posting everybody to. You'll see a poster on the side of this on the screen there. Those have been out and about on our network for some time now. They are members of our GTR team who are fronting this campaign, and we're doing a lot of visuals, radio adverts, as well as on-station and newspaper advertising campaigns. So today we wanted to give you another chance as our stakeholders just to ask any further questions at this stage. You'll be able to do so a little bit later on. So from the 20th of May, that is the start date for this timetable. 70% of the capacity benefits will be introduced on the May timetable period. There will be a period, though, of a transition phase in the first 3 weeks. I want to talk about that a little bit more, and what that means and why. It's a major task to relocate rolling stock. Every single part of our train stabling, and where trains stable is the stabling locations that are around our network, such as places like Bedford, Cricklewood, Peterborough, Cambridge, all the major depots, sidings in Horsham, Epsom, Dorking, and the like. There are many of them. In terms of the transition, we have a number of units currently that are delivered, certainly on the Thameslink network, where they are berthed out off our network. So places like Dollans Moor, or they're in places where they don't need to be on day one of the timetable. Clearly, we're also moving trains into new locations, into Kent and various other places as we mobilise those routes as well. So we're having to relocate those trains, and that's a task that is we have a full mobilisation plan for the weekend of the 19th and 20th of May, but it's moving somewhere in the region of 32 Thameslink units from one place to another, which clearly can't happen all in one go. We're hiring drivers in from alternative operators who will also help with the transition, but also reliant on other trains being moved around as well. So the transition phase will take in a few weeks, and we'll come on to what that means as well. We're also moving on our Thameslink network somewhere in the region of 400 drivers out of our 1,900 drivers. They've been reallocated around the network as new depots open as well. So there's a huge logistical challenge to bring in the new timetable there. And over on Southern, we're moving towards longer fixed formation trains. So also those formations need to be moved around as well in the weekend of the 19th and 20th of May. So we're also doing a similar exercise, albeit a more localized effort on the Southern network, where we're providing some longer trains, and we need to form them up in the right manner. So that will be taking place over that weekend. That will mean there's some short notice or short changes across the weekend, and on Thameslink a little bit more of a larger piece, which I'll come on to in a moment. So moving on to our Thameslink network, what does it mean for Thameslink? Well, it means that there will be a small number of services that will be added progressively over the first 3 weeks. The routes that will be affected in the main are Horsham to Peterborough, Orpington to Luton, and the Rainham to Luton route as well. The reasons for that is because that is particularly in the Kent region, they are where most of our trains are located off patch, off our routes, need to be brought in. We also need to align ourselves with Southeastern, where they need to move a number of units from existing spaces into other spaces, and effectively it's like moving home and moving around the network, and that's why those routes are affected in that way. It is a very small number of services that that are affected, mostly off-peak, and where there are peak services affected, our colleagues at Southeastern will be providing an alternative train so that passengers are able to continue using or keep moving other services. So actually, overall, there are very few trains that are not running, and most of them are off peak. So we'll be providing the detail to passengers through normal communication channels, which includes the Rail Plan 2020, online, and through the National Rail Inquiries as well. And we'll be doing a further campaign to ensure people keep checking their train times in the first 3 weeks of the timetable. As I said, on the Southern network, actually the changes that will be required on the Southern network are affecting the weekend services only. The Southern routes will have their full quantum of service from the Monday of the 21st of May. So moving on to our awareness campaign for the 20th of May. I would hope most of you have seen by now the Rail Plan 2020 posters around the station. We're urging people to check before you travel campaign rolling out. We did a media briefing with a number of media outlets yesterday with Charles Horton, and I was also there at Blackfriars as well. So there's various news activities over the course of today, TV interviews, and news items on various channels such as BBC News and the ITV News. Also, we'll be doing internal briefings to our passenger-facing teams, and one of the things that we're doing with our internal briefings is every member of staff on Southern and on Thameslink Great Northern is being briefed on all of the changes that are taking place. We have a team called Timetable Champions who are going out to every member of staff, briefing them at least once, mostly twice or 3 times. So the awareness campaign amongst our staff is gathering momentum as you'd expect it would. There are also station announcements that are taking place, as well as online frequently asked questions that we continue to update as things emerge, or people have further questions about the timetable and what it means for them. Also with Network Rail, we're also doing a fairly extensive exercise with our operational staff, so our station staff, but also signallers and our control teams. They all are having a day workshop roadshow that goes to their locations, and we're doing multiple events that are led by Network Rail, really going into the detail of what's changing, what it means for signallers, what it means for the new way of operating this network from the 20th of May. There'll be posters with that will be deployed at stations, as well as timetable leaflets and PDFs of on the Rail Plan 2020 that will be bringing people up to speed. We also actually have put on a number of our own timetables, unbranded at the moment, but they're all on the Rail Plan 2020 website that people can take a look at the weekday services. That was put on there predominantly because of the issues with the Network Rail inquiry system, whereby some of the information was missing. We've now worked with Network Rail to address those issues. We believe we've addressed them all. We identified trains that were missing, so all of those trains are now online. Right, so your help in communicating the change. Please continue to share as our stakeholders the message and material using our communications channels. We're linking to Rail Plan 2020 from a link to if you've got a website that you have as a user group, please feel free to put a link to our website on yours. Share our press releases through your channels, be it Twitter, Facebook, or any other activities you do. Print and display the awareness posters at your places of work if you're able to do so. Inform staff and visitors to your venues if you work in various places around our network, and also the social media channels with our content, or followers on Twitter. Your assistance is invaluable in getting the messages out, and everything we can do to make our passengers aware of the significant changes would be very good. As change of this scale, we're acutely aware that every single train changes on the 20th of May, and that is a fundamental change to some people and the way of their morning and evening routines. I'm fully aware of that. That's one of the reasons, clearly why we've gone into such a large consultation to identify and make sure that we've captured absolutely everything we can with school trains, with key connections, key trains, and on the back of that, as many of you will know, we've made literally hundreds of significant changes to our timetable on the back of the consultation, and hopefully that has addressed as many of the hot topics that could have come out. Clearly, with a timetable change of this nature, we're never going to be able to please everybody, but equally, we are fully aware that many people's travel patterns will need to change, but hopefully for the better once everybody gets into a new way of using our trains. So in terms of the next steps for the timetable change, 30% of the capacity benefits will be introduced, further 30% of the capacity benefits will be introduced in the Thameslink phases of December 2018, May 19 and December 19 as well. All of the benefits for Southern are introduced in May, and that forms the bedrock of the timetable, and the Thameslink progressively builds from there. And also on the Great Northern routes, particularly on the metro routes, there's an interim timetable that will be out in May. We're moving towards the consultation timetable that we consulted on, and fully intend to introduce that once all the new trains are delivered on that route. However, at this stage, there is an integrated timetable that needs to be put in place that matches the new Thameslink timetable with the older rolling stock that's still in place, and then as we transition through, all the benefits will flow on the Great Northern Metro routes from there. So clearly there'll be a bedding in process in the timetable. We will be constantly reviewing, monitoring the operations of the timetable from a performance perspective, but also how passengers adapt to trains. That there may be a need to change some formations potentially as we look at it, as we look around. We've done our best to make sure that we match what we believe is passenger demand with the supply of carriages, but we'll clearly be closely monitoring that in the first few weeks, and how the rolling deployment as well impacts our services. We will keep the dialogue going with all of the stakeholders that we have met and the new groups that have been formed over the time. So your views will be, in the initial stages, will be absolutely welcome. Clearly, there may be things that we just need to tweak every now and again, or to adapt, and that they will be doing that. And Jane in our team has also started a list of the things that were already coming through, that can we look at certain things, and we're forming that view as to what we would do from there. There will be key opportunities to discuss further within webinars and meetings planned in June of what the timetable impact is for you, and therefore we will certainly have that dialogue, ongoing dialogue, and make changes as we can. Thanks very much for listening. I'll hand over to you for any questions right now, and we'll give you a chance to send some through, and then we'll do our best to answer them. Any specific detailed questions, I'll do my best to answer, but some of the more detailed questions about particular timings at particular stations, we may have to come back to you on those. I'll just pause this now, and then we'll start to look at some of the questions. Thank you. Right, good afternoon everyone again. A couple of questions are coming through now. So first one from Simon Fisher. Will efforts continue to improve morning peak West London line services following the planned May timetable changes? So very aware that in the timetable that there are some trains that lay over at Clapham Junction. We are integrating with an improved London Overground service. They have running this, operating at an increased service, of which we're fitting in as well. We're also matching our metro service with the times on the West London line, sorry, West Coast main line. Of course, we'll absolutely try and do as best we can to reduce those dwell times at Clapham Junction. At this stage, we're not able to make specific changes. We'll clearly be monitoring the timetable from both the perspective of our trains and the West London line, London Overground, and if there's a way of swapping trains around, then we absolutely will. What we're doing on the West London line is introducing longer 8 carriage trains on every train. That's a good significant increase in the number of carriages on that route. So there'll be an immediate capacity benefit. In order to do that, as you will know, we're not able to operate trains beyond East Croydon to Coulsdon Town. It was a clear, either we have the 8-car trains on the route. We have 15 in total. 12 of those will be allocated to the West London line. So therefore, the one train a day between East Croydon and Coulsdon Town and Purley will no longer be operational after May, but we will continue to do the any timetable tweaks we can. Thank you. Okay, next question is from Alison Thorpe on the South Downs National Park Authority. Berwick and Glynde, 2 stations which are 6 minutes apart, are set to lose a direct service between them. I would like to know what research was done to ascertain the number of passengers who would be affected by this change before the new timetable was agreed. You're probably aware that the changes will increase journey times dramatically. So, yes, Berwick and Glynde are 2 stations that are on the line between Lewes and Eastbourne. The new southern timetable is one that we've taken great care in how we deploy trains and how they and particularly how the system operates. We have retained all peak trains at Berwick and Glynde, so direct trains to and from London Victoria and London Bridge are all in the train plan. What we've ascertained to do, what Southern has at the moment, is a number of routes and a number of trains that make odd stops, odd calling patterns, and therefore that creates a number of disadvantages in terms of the current operational delivery of the timetable. So every time a train stops, it's 2 minutes into the schedule. Normally, and in case in point of Berwick, these were done off very short turnarounds out of Eastbourne, and we had to take a view looking at passenger demand versus the impact that stops would have on particular services and the interaction on a number of routes. the number of people who use those services in the off-peak period averages around 4 to 6 people on those trains. It is therefore looking at alternatives, which is a change of train at Lewes, connecting trains in from there into a London service is actually the appropriate thing to do in this circumstance, given that the services are, or the ethos of the timetable change has been about improving operational performance and delivery. We don't do these things, haven't done these things lightly. All the changes were consulted. We took on board as many comments as possible. We did actually receive a number of comments for Glynd and Berwick with regards to the peak service, and I think from initial plans we have increased that peak service to match at least the current level. However, we were not able to do that for the off-peak period, and particularly when there's a number of a very small number of people who use the service, albeit important, but a change of train required at Lewes to travel onwards to London, or alternatively via Brighton. That is the appropriate thing to do in terms of being able to significantly improve the southern timetable. We have actually, since the comments have come through regarding some of the particular feedback, reinstated one stop in the last train, which is the 2246 from London Victoria to Eastbourne. That train has now been reinstated to call at Berwick. Thank you. Okay, from Gillian at Hadley Wood. The morning commuter trains from Hadley Wood alternating between Moorgate and King's Cross are causing great angst. Please can you give any assurance how long this will last so that we can communicate this? Yes, so as I said in my previous presentation, we've had to make a number of changes to the Great Northern Metro service, in particular how we mix the new Thameslink service with the older rolling stock and what will be an older timetable that we can't operate every single train with the limited class 3 or the older class 313 trains. So we've had to do some small, albeit changes in the morning with trains to London serving King's Cross and Moorgate from a number of stations. Simply trying to marry up the old and the new timetables was just not possible to insert all stops in every train. This is a temporary timetable period that will last until December 2018, once we have more rolling stock and newer rolling stock and that can operate at a higher speed and higher braking or better braking that will get the benefits out of the particular acceleration of the trains. At that point we will be able to review the Moorgate services again and move towards our final consulted timetable, where there will be many more trains and certainly an increase in capacity and routes throughout the peak and in the off-peak. Indeed, the off-peak changes we're introducing many of the off-peak frequency improvements in this May. So the Welwyn Garden City route increases to 4 trains an hour all day throughout the day, Mondays to Saturdays and on Sundays. And on the Hertford loop, again an increase of off-peak services to 4 trains an hour throughout the day, including the evenings, that's on Mondays to Fridays and Saturdays, where Saturdays represents a doubling of the service, really, where there's a half-hourly service currently, and that will go to quarter-hourly, so that'll be a welcome increase. The only way in which we can do this is do a merged timetable, and this very much is the May represents an interim position. Okay, so we've had a number of questions from Theresa Villiers' MP office regarding services between Bedford and Luton to London. So we'll wrap as many of these questions up into one as possible. So fast services from Bedford and Luton not stopping at West Hampstead Thameslink, which would give quicker access to the London Underground network. The simple answer is the track capacity of the number of trains that need to operate into London from both the Thameslink route and the East Midlands trains route means in the peak period our faster trains between St Albans and London simply do not have the space in the timetable on the track and the capacity to call at West Hampstead. We've done as many trains as we can, stopping at West Hampstead prior to the main area of the peak and the contra peak, and clearly in the off peak as well. 2 trains an hour will call there, but it's simply not possible to call any more trains on West Hampstead because it would mean removing trains from the system had we inserted stops into those trains. So the fast services that are designed to replace the removal of East Midlands train services from Bedford and Luton, the question has been asked, well, why not just call at Bedford and Luton, but more stops that are in the service than it is designed to replace. We have taken a very first of all, this position was fairly late in the day that we actually found out about this particular change. Certainly, all of our plans originally were to introduce 8 trains an hour from Bedford to London, which were serving all of the intermediate stations between Bedford and St Albans. However, the position that East Midlands trains found themselves are not able to call at Bedford and Luton meant that the Department of Transport asked us to see if we could do or work with East Midlands trains for a interim solution that we would look at. Now, initially we were asked to do that, but of running a train from Bedford, Luton straight down to London. However, the significant number of passengers who use our services at St Albans meant that actually when we looked at all the plans, that St Albans absolutely needed to have a call in the service, and so we're delivering a journey time to London of between 44 and 47 minutes, depending on a particular train. That was a position that was accepted by the Department for Transport, and we were asked to run those trains, and that has meant that some intermediate stations that were due to benefit from more services and more capacity will have to unfortunately will not receive those until December 2020. The reason for the East Midlands trains, I just want to touch upon that. The reason for the changes to our services and East Midlands trains is entirely down to the infrastructure or the infrastructure rebuild that's currently taking place north of Bedford. Prior to the award of this franchise and how the specifications for the Thameslink and the East Midlands trains franchises were put together in 2013, we worked on the basis that the infrastructure schemes north of Bedford, which was 2 additional tracks or 1 or 2 additional tracks depending on the location, electrification, new trains, was meant to be delivered in 2017, and therefore the 2 services would be able to operate, or the 2 operators would be able to operate services over more infrastructure effectively. That hasn't been delivered, and it's not going to be delivered by Network Rail until December 2020. So there's again another interim position whereby the 2 operators are providing improvements, but at a point of the Bedford and Luton calls not being able to be put into the East Midlands trains. So we'll be running these faster trains for a period from this May until December 2020, when the benefits of the infrastructure scheme are realised, and then we'll revert to calling our trains at the stations that were previously planned. But going back to the question, the St Albans is an absolute station that needs the trains, otherwise without it would have left significant gaps in the timetable. Just following on from that question, the same question has been asked about why are the new fast services not more why are they not more frequent. So there's a certain amount of rolling stock we have and track capacity and of that for East Midlands trains as well. We're able to run 8 trains an hour within our existing fleet, and with the number of platforms available at Bedford. running any more faster services from Bedford to London is simply not possible without removing further stops in other stations such as Flitwick, Leagrave and Harpenden, and that would be a position that we just can't accommodate that sort of change. So whilst technically there is space in the track for those trains if they were to operate further north. However, until the infrastructure is available north of Bedford, there simply is not that space to deliver faster services more frequently, as asked there. Right, question from Chris Smith of the North Customer Cabinet. Regarding train times on websites such as National Rail Inquiries, etc., the new Great Northern timetable will have some trains into King's Cross and some trains into St Pancras, and most people won't care which they go to. Is there any change to the timetable search engines to allow a search for King's Cross St Pancras as a single destination, so that one search finds trains to both stations? That's a good question. The way in which you can navigate around that at this stage is to select London all stations. That is a way in which you will be able to pick up both terminals. At this moment in time, I'm not aware of any particular change to the National Rail Inquiries websites, whether we can ask them to look at a King's Cross St Pancras station. We will if that hasn't already been, I'm not aware of that, but if that may have been asked of within the organisation, we will feed that back to you once we've asked the correct people. But at the moment, the way in which to navigate around the either station is to select London all stations and then your destination or origin from there. Thank you. Okay, so question from Roger Johnson at Sevenoaks. Practical problem. I downloaded the 18-page Thameslink timetable, printed out, but on A4 paper, the font is so tiny I can barely read it. Can you very quickly provide it in a format that is legible on A4, please? So this was an interim position to get information out. We are very shortly going to be issuing our PDF timetables, which are far more legible than that. If you wish to send, or if you'd like us to send you an A3 version, if you can direct message one of the team here with your address, we will then happily send one out to you with a A3 version. Thank you. Right, question from Arthur Taylor. Will Thameslink staff, including managers, be out at stations advising travellers of the changes? Yes, many of our staff from all grades will be out across all of the networks, so not just Thameslink but on Great Northern and Southern as well, I'm sure, in the first few days, particularly at the peak periods, and we'll be out and about to help passengers with the new information or new times and trains, etc. Okay. So next question from Trevor Davis. Hi Phil, we know that there is an ongoing upgrade programme to the Class 7 377 units, that's our southern trains, used on the Sussex Coast services. Will be a full fleet available to meet your capacity demands from the 20th of May? The answer is yes. We have built up a programme of stock utilisation in terms of how many trains that will be kept in maintenance or for refurbed, and how many are in traffic, and that's all been factored into the plan. So all of the trains will be available for the Sussex Coast and our metro trains from there. We are actually continuing a refurbishment programme for all of our 377 fleet that carries on until 2021. So the first our set of 3-car trains and the first sets of 4-car trains are now being refurbished with new seat covers and new door mechanisms and new carpets, part of a refresh program that will carry on until 2021. Okay, so next question is from Edward Carter from Royston, and Leon Stott from the Letchworth, and Sarah Bartram from Ashwell. Grateful if you could this question be answered on all three groups, please could we clarify whether there is any phased introduction of the new timetable on the Great Northern Line north of Hitchin? Will all trains in the timetable we've been provided with be there from day one? The answer is yes. On the Cambridge line, there is no change. North of Hitchin, it's the Peterborough services into London that are affected in the first few weeks of the timetable. That progressively reduces as each week goes on, and I think one of the first routes that will have the full quantum is actually the Peterborough Horsham route. Mainly that affects some trains on the Monday only, and then albeit there'll be a few mainly in the off-peak period that will be affected, but just purely between Peterborough and Horsham on that route. Right, next question from the three user groups in Royston, Letchworth and Ashwell. A number of people are asking this question. Actually, we've had a lot of questions from members about ticketing arrangements for the new stations. Please can we confirm what kind of ticket will be needed to travel to each of Farringdon, City Thameslink, Blackfriars and London Bridge? Will each of the following cover the London terminals, London zones 1 to 6? If people need to upgrade season tickets to access other stations, can you please confirm what arrangements are in place? Finally, when will season tickets to the new destinations be available? So very good question, and one that we clearly getting a lot of questions about from other areas as well. A full detail of this is actually on our Railplan 2020 website. So if you go into one of the frequently asked questions, there is a section there specifically for tickets and what to do. But to answer the question here, if you're travelling from Letchworth or Royston into London, what you will need to do is have select a Thameslink, London Thameslink ticket. That will allow you access to all stations from St Pancras, Farringdon down to Elephant and Castle and London Bridge. That's just to repeat that's from Farringdon to Elephant and Castle and London Bridge, so all stations in between, which is City Thameslink and Blackfriars. That you can change your ticket from if you wish to do so at your local ticket office, and they will do that for you. And London terminals will now include London St Pancras as well. So I hope that answers your question for your specific area. I think there's similar arrangements from the south as well. Thank you. Right, so next question is from Barbara Spittle. Coodon Beach is losing a direct service to Brighton during off-peak hours and at weekends, with an impossible connection at Hampden Park, including a change of platform. How can this be justified for the sake of other passengers on other services? So we've reviewed the entire East Coast Way route in terms of the services that we're offering there. Many areas and many sections of line will have an improved frequency of trains. For Coodon Beach, the services will transfer over to the Ashford to Eastbourne section of line, and also be served by the London trains as well. Excuse me. At peak times, excuse me, my voice is going. At peak times, both on weekdays and Saturdays, we will be introducing, we've ensured as many trains from Brighton can call at Coodon Beach as possible. So particularly around the 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, possibly 5 o'clock mark, there are, and indeed in the mornings, there are some Brighton trains that call there. But generally speaking, in the off-peak period, you are right that there are no more direct trains to Brighton. Best way to do that journey is to change at Eastbourne as opposed to Hampden Park, or alternatively travel on one of the London trains to Lewes and change at Lewes onto a train that will be running every 10 minutes between Lewes and Brighton. So there are more frequent trains over many sections of line. One of the ways in which that was only possible was to transfer some stops between other stations, and particularly the Eastbourne to Ashford service will now be the main service from there. In terms of return from Brighton, again, the suggestion would be to change at Eastbourne, where there will be an 11-minute connection at Eastbourne for a train to Coodon Beach. Okay, so next question is from Red Hill user group. The first week, the early trains from Merstham, Red Hill, Erswood, Salford and Horley towards Gatwick are mostly cancelled, leaving us without a service for long periods. What will be done to help passengers to get to work at Gatwick and for connections to Brighton and other stations further south? So I've just looked at the timetable for that, so that there is a gap in service of around 90 minutes. So what we would do is clearly look at alternative options, either trains stopping additionally, or if there is anything we can do via a train method or a replacement bus or ticket acceptance on local bus services. We won't leave people stranded without a train service for that period of time, clearly, but we will take that away and be in contact with you in due course as to what the arrangements will be for that first period of time. But thanks for bringing that to our attention, and we'll do something about that. Thank you. So we've had a couple of questions regarding Oakley Park. So we clearly it's very similar to a question that was answered before about Hadley Wood. There is a point in the timetable where the end position timetable, which is the one that we consulted on and clearly will be implemented in due course. Just to clarify, the consultation timetable that we consulted for all routes, that is all of our routes on every brand, was about the end position, and the end position at the time of consultation was December 2018, and that was the point in which all the improvements and all the changes and all the new infrastructure and all the new trains were delivered and put into place. It was never the intention that the May timetable for all routes would be the exact replica of what was consulted out, because clearly all the new trains were not going to be in place for that. So what is represented on the Great Northern Metro service is an interim timetable where some stations, as I said, have been affected by the need to run trains to London King's Cross or into Moorgate, as opposed to all into Moorgate and a few others into King's Cross. So in the respect of Oakley Park, that is representing the morning peak, a reduction in the number of trains that we're operating. We are aware of the concerns that have been raised. It is for a temporary period of time until December, at which point, when there is sufficient new trains, we can amend the timetable to accommodate the stops. Now, what we do with the Great Northern Metro service is bringing in as many improvements as we can in the off-peak period and running as many trains as we can with the existing fleet, whilst also adapting the timetable to facilitate the Thameslink timetable, where there are shared sections of route between Alexandra Palace and Finsbury Park. The Great Northern Metro line itself has seen significant growth in recent years and decades, and the timetable needs to be adapted to accommodate that, to work reliably alongside Thameslink, providing some additional turnaround times and additional station calling times, and in doing so that's led to an interim timetable that will need to operate temporarily until December. Okay, so we've had a question in from Neil Middleton. The big issue for St Albans to Bedford is the changes made to handle the East Midlands trains changes. Is there any breaking news? The position that we've spoken about previously, and it's previously there, is there is no change to that. I hope that answers your question. There is no further news to say about the East Midlands trains changes. I know that they are looking at various trying to make improvements to their timetable from December, but I've not yet been party to that. But as it stands at the moment, there is no further news to communicate on the basis of that from St Albans. I hope that answers your question though. So we've had a further question in from Roger Johnson at 7/8. The National Rail Inquiries website shows a London Thameslink ticket to, say, St Pancras is valid via the southeastern trains direct, presumably from 7/8 to London Bridge. It's a comment that this is very welcome. So do, for others on the webinar, do check any options that for tickets in your local area, and try out what the new arrangements are and what new connectivity will be offered from May. Okay, so next question that's coming is, do you think your marketing campaign has gone down well with the general public, your customers, and indeed stakeholders? And so the answer to that is the campaign that we're running, Rail Plan 2020, is designed to raise awareness of the significant changes that will be taking place in May. Not only May, but actually rolling out in phases from May. May is the first phase, and then it rolls out in consecutive phases all the way through. The awareness campaign that we're embarking on in this has done that. It's raised awareness of the change. It's encouraged people to take a look at their train times. Whilst not everybody will like their own specific change or particular change to train, the very point is that we are trying to reach out to 500,000 of our customers every day to make them aware of the change in May, and that the campaign is doing absolutely just that. Equally, the consultation that we ran, 28,000 people responded and we did a similar exercise with that, with various marketing campaigns, leaflet drops, announcemements on trains, posters at stations, and we raised awareness through a variety in ways that the railway's never done before. And to get 28,000 responses was an achievement in itself, and actually really helped shape this timetable, and that all goes part and part of the campaigns in the lead up to 2018. So Rail Plan 2020 absolutely is raising awareness. Media outlets are aware of it, and we're gathering momentum. It started in January and it's continued all the way through until we'll continue all the way through to day one, and then continue that beyond that in terms of the next phases as well. Okay, question from Mike on the Kings Lynn route. The Rail Plan 2020 website says there are no changes to peak off-peak restriction times. We've been led to understand that the first train into King's Cross after 10 o'clock from Kings Lynn, the current 8:27 arriving 10:13, is to be replaced by the 08:12 arriving King's Cross at 10:05, i.e. after the normal 10 o'clock qualification for our off-peak tickets will be classified as peak, as a peak train. As you know, there's an awful lot of unhappiness about the longer journey times, the reasons that have been explained before. And if this reclassification of the first train into London is at 10 o'clock is correct, the unhappiness is going to increase. Can you reassure us on this point, please, and confirm the 10 o'clock arrival is what determines the fare? There is also another rumour going around platforms that the easement for stations north of Waterbeach allowing off-peak ticket usage in the evening peak is to be scrapped, presumably in view of the FAQ. Is this simply untrue? Thanks. So, Mike, we will have to refer back to our revenues and ticketing team. I don't have the answer here to specifically answer that directly now, but we will take that away and give you the answer in the coming days. I know our revenue team are looking at all the off-peak easements that currently exist and matching it where we're allowed to. As you know, all the fare structures and the fares setting is entirely at the driven by the Department for Transport. They actually set the fares and also take the revenue from this franchise. So we don't see any of the revenue, and yes, the DFT set the fares and are totally in control of that, but we will take that away and feed that back to you in due course. Okay, just picking up a further question. Will rail tickets be cheaper given the increased convenience? I believe that is in relation to Bedford. As I previously explained, the Department for Transport set the fares and revenue on and take the revenue from this franchise. Therefore, there is currently no changes to that at this stage. And there's a further question here from John Moore. The question I picked up from local groups was that ticket offering were different from online to ticket office. Has that now been harmonised? Not quite sure. I hope this answers the question. I believe you're talking about online fares where you can purchase them through our website, and are they different from those that you walk up fares at the ticket office? If possible, if you give us a bit more detail? Again, all we'll do is take that back to our fares and revenue team and allow them to answer that question after the session. So if you're able to do that, that would be grand. Thank you. Right, we've not got no further questions now. So thanks very much for your questions. I hope I've done my best to answer all of those. That concludes this webinar session. Thanks very much for your questions. All the Q&A will be online in the coming days. Yeah, thanks very much for this session. I hope that you are able to carry on promoting our timetable change, making your communities and people you fellow commuters and user group colleagues aware of the change, and we'll look forward to seeing you a few weeks after the change in the further sessions where we talk about how it went. Thanks very much and see you soon.